Let's jump into it, guys. Today I'm here with the Canon 430 EX3 RT, and I'm going to tell you how you can use all of these buttons and what all the menu settings mean. Let's get going. So there's an off button, a lock button, and an on button. I'm going to go ahead and switch it on. All the lock button does is make sure that all of your settings are in place. You can't move them. And then from there, let's just go over to the flash button. So this button here is the test flash. So if I press that button down, you'll see the flash fire, and that's just making sure that's working. The next is the sub menu. So if I go sub menu, I can turn the wheel to go to CFN, which is custom function. That's things like the auto power off. So if I leave my flash on, you can determine how long you want that set. And then the CFN clear, so it just clears out the settings. Then there's the personal function, which are things like AF assist beam. So if you've had your flash on your camera and you've seen it pulse like a bunch in rapid succession, that's the AF assist beam. You can turn that off in the sub menu, and then you can clear that. The next thing is the set clear, so you can clear everything. And then the version, which is just tells you what version firmware that you have. I'm going to press back and then back once more. And then we'll move on to the scroll wheel. So this is kind of how you get around by using the scroll wheel right and left. If I hit the select or set button in the middle, that goes to our home screen. And this is what it'll look like when you first start out. You'll have ETTL, wireless off. The zoom isn't set right now because it's not on the camera, but we can set that manually. And then we go into the first curtain sync, the rear curtain sync, and high speed sync. And then this last part is the exposure compensation. So if you want to make it lighter or darker. Let's go back to ETTL and talk a little bit about what that means. ETTL stands for evaluative through the lens. So what that means is your flash reads the ambient light through your viewfinder and makes a decision about how much power to emit during the flash. So it's kind of similar to using your camera in auto mode, where it makes all the decisions for you and decides what the correct settings are for your exposure. And then the other option to that is manual. So if I go press the set button and go into manual, now I'm fully controlling the amount of light that is outputted by the flash. And you can tell that because this menu changed. So once again, if I go to ETTL, I'll switch over, and then this is an exposure compensation. Whereas if I go to manual, this turns into a power that you can set. So right now it's at all the way down to 1/128, so a very, very low power. If I go ahead and use my scroll wheel, I can go to 1/1, which is a full power flash. I'll set it a full power flash now, although you don't often use a full power flash. So if I'm in manual, I'm at 1/128, I'll go in and hit set, and then I'll go ahead and set it, click set once more, and now I'm at 1:1 flash, so full power flash. So I like to use my flash in manual mode because it gives us the most control over the light. But sometimes if you're running and gunning and having a quick photo shoot, maybe ETTL is the best option for you. The next setting that I want to take a look at is this wireless. So right now wireless is off. If I go into this setting by hitting the set button, I can choose linked shot. I can choose master, slave, and this is radio. That's this little button here, like a radio tower, is for radio transmission. And that's what the RT in the 430 EX3 RT stands for, radio transmission. So radio transmission is favorable to the one below it, which is an optical slave. You can be an optical slave as well. The optical slave is when the one flash fires, they all fire once they pick up on that. Now it sounds okay. However, I use my flashes quite often during the day, and if that flash is not bright enough to overpower the sun, then the second flash will not pick up on being the slave, and it will just fire one flash. So I love the RT version,
and going to setting this one as the master radio trigger flash. And then you'll see this light turns red and then it says it's not linked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bring in my second flash here, and this will only work if you have a second flash. And here I already have the second flash set to slave. So this is the radio flash. So now when I hit this trigger, both flashes fire. So if I wanted to change that, I can go into the slave and I could make this the master, or I can make it an optical slave, whatever I need for my purposes. And the next item we'll take a look at is the zoom. So if I go to manual zoom, I can check the different focal ranges. So I can go to a very wide flash, which will spread out the light, or I can go to a very narrow 105 millimeter. Next, I want to talk about first and second curtain shutter and also high speed sync. This first button that's highlighted right now with the triangle filled in is what you'll use the vast majority of time. That's what we're used to seeing when we think of flash. And what that does is when you press the shutter button on your camera, the flash fires. The next icon is the rear curtain sync, which just means that instead of pressing the shutter and having the flash fire when the shutter opens, it fires just before it closes. So if I go in here and I go to the icon with the rightmost triangle filled in, that means that right before your shutter closes, the flash will fire instead of when the shutter opens. And that's useful for longer exposures so that your subject isn't moving, for example. You won't capture all of that motion blur. The last one in this menu is high speed sync. And high speed sync is great because typically if you're just shooting on your regular setting here, you can only go to 1/200th of a second on your camera and before it stops. It won't go any higher than that. That's called the sync speed. So if you go to high speed sync, you can actually shoot more than 1/200th of a second on your camera and control the light a little bit more if you need a faster shutter speed, whether that's for action or just to control the light so you get the shot in your head. That's pretty much it. You can press down to get to ETTL or manual, up to go to your focal ranges, over to set if you want a wireless or master or slave, and then you can go right to set the exposure balance, or in manual, you can set your power this way. So that's a quick look at the 430 EX3 RT speedlight.
If you got a new piece of information, please give me a like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys soon.